Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's show, we're going to get into part one of our mailbag. That's right. Over the course of 2 episodes this week, we're going to take questions from our listeners about all things Orioles. And in this episode, we're going to cover a lot of ground, going from the major leagues down to the minor leagues, talking about some very timely topics. But before we get into that, as we like to do at the top of every show, we want to welcome some new members to our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, we're grateful this week to have 3 new Patreon members. Michael Thompson hopped in at the AAA level, paid for the full year up front. Amazing. Thank you, Michael. Hope you enjoyed the show and the content. Leon Beal, he signed up for the free trial, and he'll be heading to Double A in a few days here. And then Abraham Terry signed up. Again, shout out to our friends Garrett, Sarah, Devin, Cicero. I don't want to leave anyone out. Andrew signed up at the single A level. He's going to go join Braylon Tavera and hope to break out there. So thank you guys. As always, appreciate it.
We always appreciate our Patreon members' support. And as a reminder, this week we'll be dropping our top 50 prospects update for the month of May. So if you are a member of our Patreon community, you have that to look forward to. And if you're not a member yet, consider signing up today to become a member so you have access to that show and so much more bonus content from us here at Orioles on the Verge. I will dive right in now to the mailbag with the first question. I think it's a question that everybody really wants the answer to, and it comes from Maroon Bird Wing. If you could choose one player on the Orioles to close 100 times and take on one gorilla in order to try to win, which player would it be? Now, this is active players. I can't pick retired players, so I'll start with Nick.
We're already at this point in the season, huh? So I think a lot of people want to point to the biggest, strongest players on the roster. But give me the good old country boy. Give me Keegan Aiken. I think Keegan Aiken can do it blindfolded. I want country boy instinct. He's going to take him down. The answer is Keegan Aiken.
I was thinking about going 2 different ways on this. The one's a little obvious. Tyler O'Neill. I mean, he is very fragile, but he's strong, big. You know, you're going to lose a lot of them, but you might be able to win in the end. Or you go the speed option, Jorge Mateo, hopefully tire him out, take him, little hits here and there. Might take a while, but you could win. Or win-win, you lose, and he's off the roster.
The most obvious answer is Felix Bautista. So I would probably go that, but the more entertaining pick for me is actually Yennier Cano, because 1, Cano is going to win, and 2, can you imagine 100 Yennier Canos doing the stare after they take down the gorilla? And I'll just throw this out there too. If Ben McDonald did it, that story on the broadcast would be hilarious.
From gators to gorillas.
You wouldn't need 100 Ben McDonald's. You just need 1. That's it. Next question. Bird is the word. He wants to ask yet again, because no one is answering this question and no one is acting on this question. Why is Jorge Mateo still on the team? Because he hasn't fought a gorilla yet. And why does Jackson Holliday not play every day, Zach?
I can't sit here and logically justify why Mateo is still on the roster and why Holliday doesn't play every day. I'll take the Holliday part first. In every facet of the game, Jackson Holliday is getting better, despite what I still feel like is too few reps over the course of a week. They need to stop treating him like a platoon player and play him every day. I want him out there against tough lefties. That's the only way he's going to get better. I can see the projection now, the trajectory, I should say, with Holliday. And it's easy coming off of Sunday's game to kind of have a high around Jackson Holliday. But we had a mailbag a few weeks ago where someone asked us, could Holliday be leading off by some point this season? I think we're trending in that direction, and I think we're going to be better off for it when it happens. And the best way to start pushing him that direction is to challenge him more. Putting him out there against right-handed pitching only a few days a week no longer does that. Last year it did. This year it's not doing it. He's gotten so much better. So start playing him against the lefties and start pushing towards having him as a leadoff hitter. As for Mateo, again, I just don't understand it at this point. because his value is his speed and his versatility. And right now, you don't really have a use for either one, and you desperately need help with your offense, and he's not giving it to you. So the only thing I could think to this point, if you want Mateo off the roster, root for Kobe Mayo to perform really well during this call-up and hope that Jordan Westberg or Ramon Arias come off the IL soon, because that's probably the fastest way to get Mateo out of here. Otherwise, I think he's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, Jorge Mateo. I think it's on Mike Elias, the fact that he's on the roster, but it's on Brandon Hyde for the way he's used. And to be fair, he hasn't been playing as much lately. But I agree, Holiday should be playing every day at second base at this point. Shout out to Dan Sanchez on Blue Sky, who says basically outside of a 5-game hitless skid in early April, Jackson Holiday has been out of this world. He's got a 205 WRC plus in his last 8 games. His last 15 games, he's got a 196 WRC plus. He's getting on base more. His chase rate is really low. He's not chasing pitches, but his walk rate's only 7%. That's because they're giving him pitches to hit, but his strikeout rate is down 11% from last year. So I think as long as he continues to hit like this, the walk rate's going to go right up. With that, he's showing power, had 2 home runs in the game on Sunday. Yeah, he should be playing every day. He's 21. He's 21 all season. He just turned 21 in December, and he's already doing this while looking better and better defensively at second base, in my opinion. Mateo's not even getting pinch running duties like he has or should be in the past. I feel like Dylan Carlson has been pinch running more often than Mateo at this point. So I really have no idea why he's here. Hopefully, like Zach said, Mayo just is finally going to get a real chance, consistent at bats, to show what he can do. And there was a great article in Baseball America today showing how Mayo is closing holes in his game while he was down in AAA to start this season as well. Westberg gets back, Arias gets back. Mateo's got to go. I would personally have Luis Vasquez or even Levon Soto up before I had Mateo up, but it is what it is. But yeah, Jackson Holiday breakout is real, and it's happening right in front of our eyes during a losing season, unfortunately.
Yeah, you guys answer that one. I just don't get why you gave Jackson Holiday an $8.19 million signing bonus, the highest bonus given to a high school player, and you have treated him as this platoon prospect up to this point. And I get, like, if you want to, sit him against a Tariq Skubal or Garrett Crochet, fine. I can understand that. But like Andrew Abbott, like who's sitting in the box fearful of Andrew Abbott, like throwing 90 miles per hour? I don't get it. I also just don't understand like how, I know we've talked a lot in the past about when the prospects come up and they don't get that regular run, they're sitting on the bench, and because there's a lot of discussion about the Orioles still feel like they can get valuable work in sitting on the bench, getting their working in the cage and stuff. But like, how does watching this kid come in, have a nice game, and then benching him because you're facing some crappy lefty help him? That I don't understand. But it is what it is. I do agree with Zach's point though. If the breakout is real and he is trending towards being, a leadoff hitter and more potent everyday hitter in this lineup, then fantastic. And it's a moot point, but yeah, it's been frustrating early on this year.
Next question is going to come from not that Kevin Brown. Are you surprised by Kyle Stowers' success in Miami? This has become a big talking point on Orioles Twitter as he hit a game-winning grand slam off of Mason Miller in a 2-home run game, and he has looked really good so far this season, the first month of the season for the Marlins. Nick, what do you think?
Yes, and I hope it's for real. And I will admit I'm wrong. If it's for real, I hope he has a fantastic career. And if Trevor Rogers never becomes a contributor, so be it. You win some trades, you lose a bunch of trades. Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby, go be great. Go become the face of the Marlins for all. Like, have fantastic careers. Close the book on them. They're out. They're done. They're not Orioles.
In a vacuum, I'm not surprised because I've always thought that Stowers is one of those players who, if he got the runtime in the major leagues that he was not getting with the Orioles, the highs were going to be really high. And so far, the highs have been incredibly high for him over the first month of the season. If there's anything that I could pick out that surprises me, is that the strikeout to walk numbers aren't horrible by his standard. Strikeout rate of 27% is a little high, but when you consider that it was pretty consistently in the 30s in the major leagues with the Orioles, and he always had high 20% strikeout rates, at least in the minors, it's not that bad, and he's walking almost 10% of the time. So that's a real positive that I probably didn't see coming, but otherwise, everything I've seen from Stowers so far this year is the kind of player that I thought he could be when he was hot, which is someone who makes an impact with his bat, someone who has power to all fields and can turn on a high fastball like he did in that walk-off grand slam. So to put it this way, I would be equally unsurprised if Stowers goes on a tear this year, represents the Marlins in the All-Star game, as I would be if he gets cold by the end of May and his year-end numbers look nothing like this.
Yeah, exactly. He's a streaky hitter. First of all, yeah, like Nick said, I love Kyle Stowers, loved Connor Norby, loved following their minor league careers as they were coming up. So, of course, I'm rooting for them, and I hope Kyle Stowers continues. I'll just say his stats right now. After an 0 for 5 today with the walk, he's got a 310 batting average. What is this quick math? A 902 OPS, 147 WRC plus, 10.1% walk rate, 27.1% strikeout rate. Excuse me, and a 212 ISO. But he's also got a 392 batting average for balls in play. So that's going to come down. But hey, if he can strike out 27% of the time and walk 10% of the time with the way he impacts the ball, I think he's a fringe major league starter in a corner outfield position. There's nothing to sneeze at there. We've seen the strikeout rate be a bigger issue than that. It was 35% last year, 36% the year before that, and just under 30% the year before that. The walk rate's never been this high. So, yeah, if he can keep that up, even if the BABIP comes down, he'll be a pretty solid player. But I'm just happy he's having a major league career. He's got to do it on a bad team, unfortunately. But, yeah, more power to him.
Go now this question from Vivek. Shifting to the farm system here, who would be your Orioles minor league pitcher of the year and positional player of the year at this point in the season? Feel free to give a top three. I'll start with Bob on this one.
The pitcher's got to be Braxton Bragg. I mean, we've been talking about him all year. From the first time we saw him throwing mid to high 90s with his fastball, it was like, whoa, what the hell? Where did that come from? And then change up is new, looks pretty damn good, and he's just been more and more impressive every time out. So I'll give him the nod. At number one, I would have said Alex Pham was up there in the top three before his injury. Hopefully it's not too serious. Who else would be up there? I'm just trying to do some quick memory. I would say Levi Wells will round out my top three. And then position player side, for me, it's got to be Dylan Beavers. It's got to be Dylan Beavers for me, especially if you take out the first series and a half. His numbers are just mind-blowingly good. So I think it's between him and Kobe Mayo, who's obviously now up in the major leagues for position player. So Mayo's not going to end up getting it because hopefully he won't be a prospect anymore. And third, Creed Willems. What a great start to the season. So that would round out my top three there.
No argument there. I think it's clear top two. It's Beavers and Bragg. We're only a month into the year, so a lot can change. But right now, yeah, it's Beavers and Bragg. And you could say Creed Willems is in the conversation there as far as hitters, but I don't think anyone's even close on the pitching side. And that's not an indictment on how pitchers are performing. That's just a testament to how unbelievably fantastic Braxton Bragg has been this year, which we'll dive into more, I'm sure, in our top 50 update.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's Bragg on the pitching side. And I would probably agree with Bob that you'd have Levi Wells second. I do think that you have a couple of pitchers who right now maybe don't have the back of the baseball card stats. They're going to be in this conversation by the end of the year. Cameron Weston, Trey Gibson are two guys that come to mind that I think are going to get a lot better. My third, though, would probably be Nestor Herman. He has put together a very nice season at Aberdeen. I think he's going to get promoted to Chesapeake soon. And then for hitters, it's Beavers, number one. I don't think anybody comes close. For all the reasons that Bob just mentioned, that Mayo probably and hopefully won't really be in consideration for this award at the end of the year, I will take him off the list, and I'll put Creed Willems at number 2. Number 3 for me was a coin toss between Aaron Estrada and Ethan Anderson. I'll take Ethan Anderson for now because of the power, but both players have been very good so far.
And Judd Fabian, shout out to Judd Fabian, who's got that classic 200 batting average, 300 plus on base, 400 plus slugging percentage.
And the way these FCL Orioles are starting off their year, might have some of them join the conversation, but no. Next question here comes from John Bodwright. What is the cause of the Orioles' poor runners in scoring position hitting, and how can it be fixed ASAP? I can give my answer real quick and just say if I knew the answer, I'd be a Major League hitting coach and be working with Major League hitters and not working with MBA students right now like I do. I don't know. What do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Really, it just comes down to your best hitters have to start hitting. I know that runners in scoring position is brought up a lot in broadcasts, and it is important. I'm not going to try to diminish its importance because clearly you have to be able to get those runs across. But let's think about who's coming up in those situations right now, and who do you want up in those situations? Because Ryan Mountcastle is not the guy you want up with runner on second and one out. It's probably limited at this point to Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, and Jackson Holliday, if Holliday's even in the lineup. Gunnar seems to be slowly coming into his own, but isn't quite back yet. Adley has been really up and down. Tyler O'Neill is hurt. Heston Kjerstad has been incredibly streaky. So I would just argue that across the board, the Orioles offense needs to get better. And at that point, the problem with runners in scoring position will take care of itself. There are some things philosophically that you could look at with the Orioles offensive approach and question, whether they need to be fine-tuned. Do they need to be more aggressive early in the count? I know that's something that comes up a lot with the Orioles. Are they too reliant on the home run? That's been a debate that we've been having, or that has been happening in some parts of Birdland now for at least a year. All of those things are fair to question, but for me, the bottom line is just that your hitters, and especially the hitters that you're counting on to produce and win games for you, have to get better.
Yeah, if we knew the answer to this, we'd be one of those podcasters getting hired by major league teams like Mike Petriello tweeted about earlier today. Yeah, I would love to know what our BABIP is in those situations, because it seems like a lot of it is just plumb bad luck, but obviously that's not what anybody wants to hear, and it's not an excuse we want to say. But yeah, you gotta get those timely hits, and in 2023 we got them, and ever since we haven't. So hopefully that tide turns sometime soon. Let me go ahead and ask the next question from Bobby Jones, who would like to know, if the season spirals, please know, who are some arms around the league you target in a trade? He's looking at Jackson Ferris, for example. Who's someone we trade that has more than just 1 year left? What do you think, Nick?
I don't know who's available. It's May 5th. I'm not looking at the trade deadline right now. I got nothing.
I haven't thought that far ahead either, so I haven't really started to dive into other teams' farm systems to consider who the Orioles might target if they were going to sell, although I will say Jackson Ferris is a great starting point. As for players that they could move that have more than a year of control, I'd have to imagine that some relievers outside of Felix Bautista could be in play in that conversation. I don't see him going regardless, but if let's say that they got a really good offer for Yennier Cano, or they got a really good offer for Keegan Aiken, would they turn it down knowing that the last 2 months of the season are lost? Probably not. So I would start there if you're going to look at players that are under control beyond next season or beyond this season. But I don't expect it to be any really big names or really any long-term building blocks.
Yeah, Bobby, I understand the spiral, but there's no way to know like which guys are going to target. I'm going to guess the Orioles would target guys that wouldn't be the first ones to come to your mind, but when you dig into them, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense if that were to come to pass. And as far as guys we could trade that have multiple years, I'd still say that. And again, even if we sell this season, it's not like we're selling for the long term. You'd still be trying to reload, as we talked about last week. But maybe Heston Kjerstad could be a guy if another team thinks they can. Kyle Stowers him up. Obviously, he hasn't performed incredibly well so far today, but maybe he's a guy that could be dealt. Mountcastle, if he could regain some value before the trade deadline. Just like no one else positionally is really standing out to me, but yeah, you'd have to look in the bullpen. Maybe a guy like Keegan Aiken, because he'll be out of options next year. It's tough. Yeah, Yannier Cano, I would be hesitant to give up on just because I don't know. I think he's still very cheap and under control. I'd still think he's a guy you want in there. Dean Kramer, does he have value to anybody that would like an arm for this year and the next two afterwards? Maybe that's an option as well, but let's hope we don't have to go down this path.
I'm going to go now to this question from Sterling, and I think it kind of builds into what Bobby was asking us. What is the pod's deadline if we have to call this a, quote, lost season and start thinking, unfortunately, about selling? So in other words, at what point in the year, if the Orioles haven't turned things around, are you really going to start thinking about who they could sell at the deadline?
Same as we said last week, I think, end of the month. But it's not going to be like a fire sale. You're not getting rid of everybody. The window's not shut. It's just a really crappy year, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I'm mostly out already, to be honest. But I give it till the end of the month before I'm like, it's done. You can go ahead and back it up.
Yeah, we don't need to like put in a whole new HVAC unit. We just need to get someone out here to fix it so we can use it at some point. Next, I don't know if this analogy makes sense, but I just had to get some work done on my HVAC, so I'm going there. But yeah, I think if after the White Sox series, which I think it either ends at the very end of May or the very beginning of June, if we're not at least 500, maybe not even 500, if we're not very close to 500 at that point, pack it in. If we're still almost 5, 6, 7, 10 games under 500, yeah, it's the season's a waste, and you just have to gear up for 2026. But yeah, it's not looking great right now. But like we talked about last week with the Houston Astros on May 11th, they were 11 games under 500 or something like that. So it's not impossible as much as it looks right now to come back, especially with the schedule in May. But the week schedule at least gives the Orioles a chance to try to climb back into it, get healthy, and then see what happens from there.
That's about my deadline too. And I will say that I think this upcoming road trip is going to be tough. I think the Twins series is going to be tough. And for whatever reason, I feel like in the past, the Orioles have sometimes underperformed in Anaheim. I don't know if the numbers exactly back that up, but I don't always have a good feeling when they go to the West Coast. So I'm not looking for an immediate turnaround, but at the same time, though, when you look at their schedule for the month, there are a lot of opportunities ending, of course, that White Sox series where they really could beat up on some of these teams. So that's kind of my gauge too, is end of May, if they're not at least emerging from this slump and within a few games of 500, I'll probably write this season off.
Okay. Some more trades from Callie wants to know what would be the most heartbreaking but beneficial trade we can make to get us back in it this year and set us up for the future. What do you guys think?
I literally think there is no one trade that could turn this thing around. It's too dependent on the guys that we have. The core needs to hit. Like the hitters need to hit. We need to score runs. Obviously, we know the pitching staff situation. So, yeah, it wouldn't hurt to get somebody. But at this point, it's much more than just replacing a Kyle Gibson or a Charlie Morton on the pitching staff. But that said, I would still be fine. Like Sandy Alcantara has been terrible so far this year, but his stuff still looks good. It's mostly location, and we know that can take some time after Tommy John to come back, I would not be opposed to still trying to trade for him, especially now if his value is down a little bit with the way he started the season. Maybe Heston Kjerstad could headline a trade for Sandy, or maybe you go to Tampa Bay and try to pitch them on Kjerstad for Shane Baz, or who knows, whatever. I would still be down to trade for a pitcher that has multiple years of team control after this season. But yeah, I don't think there's like, oh, if we trade for, I don't even know, Shohei Ohtani. I don't even know if that one player, even Shohei Ohtani, I don't think would fix the problems. It's all internal at this point that needs to be turned around here.
Yeah, I'm with Bob on this one. If some of the issues we've talked about tonight, and the big one being that your core is not hitting, don't resolve themselves by the All-Star break, there's not going to be one trade that comes in and fixes everything. To Callie's question, though, where I suspect he might be getting at is, and I know this is something we're going to talk about either in this mailbag or in our one later this week, is there a prospect that I think we'd have a tough time parting with for the right trade? Maybe. But right now, my mind is so far removed from saying, having to trade Kobe Mayo or Vance Honeycutt to get Enrique Bradfield Jr., or not Enrique Bradfield Jr., to get Pablo Lopez from the Twins, that I'm not even really thinking about, because it's going to take more than one deal right now if the Orioles go that route to turn it around.
Yeah, especially if we are going to have to reboot. Like, I'm just not trading Kobe Mayo or Samuel Basallo at this point. Honestly, I'm probably not trading Bradfield either. I'm not trading Dylan Beavers right now. I mean, if we're going to have to reboot, we're going to need these guys. So just in case, and even if not, they're just really good prospects anyway. But maybe Honeycutt would be like the tip-top value I would be willing to trade right now in the right deal. But it would still have to be a long-term move as well.
Yeah. And I mean, if you do need to make a trade, though, like, you have a prime opportunity in this year's draft to reload a lot. And so that's why I do think it's just a matter of, like, to build on those thoughts. Like, let's see more aggressive promotions down in the minor leagues to set these guys up. Like, let's get some more of these guys into the big leagues. If Beavers is going to keep doing this, get them to the big leagues sooner rather than later. And let's just see. It's why, yeah, it's not one magical trade that's going to fix all of this. And exactly why, again, it's not, even if this season ends up being a complete wash and we realize that in a month, then it's not a rebuild. It's the reboot, as Bob has been putting it. I have more thoughts on this and other stuff. Some other questions we'll answer, but I will save those for those questions later on.
Yeah, it's like, I just wish the Orioles were being a little more proactive. Even just, hey, Heston Kjerstad, you're not getting it done right now. We're going to demote you. We're going to give Dylan Beavers a chance for a couple weeks, see if he could spark something. Ryan Mountcastle, you're absolutely brutal to watch right now. First baseman with a 200 batting average and a 500 OPS. Send you down to AAA and try to figure things out. Give Kobe Mayo a shot every day at first base. Do something. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to Ben H's question, who says he would never take the job if he had to work for Elias, but try to tell me why Buck Showalter wouldn't be the right manager for this team right now. Zach?
So two schools of thought on this. And one is Buck's track record, which is that he can come into a place and he can get a team that is underperforming to play. So that would make him a very appealing option right now, especially because you do have some younger players that could respond to him. The problem that we have seen throughout Showalter's career as a manager has been that there tends to be a waning period at the end. The teams don't play as well. I don't hold the Yankees in 95 against Showalter, but you look at the Diamondbacks, you look at the Rangers, you look at the Orioles, you look at the Mets to a little bit lesser extent, and that's kind of what happened. They had a surge in production with him as a manager. Things were going in the right direction, and then they waned. And in the case of the Diamondbacks, they won the World Series the following year. I don't think it's because Bob Brenly was a genius as a manager, but that was a lot of what Showalter had put together. And in the end, he was not the guy who got to see that through. Ron Washington took the Rangers higher than Buck Showalter ever did. So it really does come down to, do you want the next manager to be a long-term option. Because if you do, Buck's track record suggests that he's probably not that guy. And then the other one is autonomy. And I think that's what Ben Nates is alluding to in not wanting to work for Elias. So Walter's going to want to come in. He's going to want to bring his own coaches. He seems like a guy that's pretty hands-on in the area of baseball operations. He has a player development background, so he's going to have opinions about these things. And if he doesn't feel like those opinions are being heard, he's going to be upset pretty quickly. So it would be those two things would be why I don't think he would be right for the job.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think Zach said it very well. Honestly, I think Buck Britton is the right man for this job right now. I'm totally out on Brandon Hyde right now at this point. Sunday's game against the Kansas City Royals did it for me. When you're down by 2, you have Gregory Soto warming up. It's the 8th inning. It's a close game. The lineup's actually hitting for once. And you sit Soto down and bring in Charlie Morton, who inevitably gives up 3 runs and the game is out of reach again. Like, why are you waving the white flag in a close game in the 8th inning when your team is hitting and the season is slipping away from your fingers? That is just absolutely pathetic, in my opinion. It's not the first time this season that he's done it. There was a close and late game where he brought in Ciano Perez, who had been terrible late in the game, and then, of course, it got handed away from him. I don't know. I mean, look, I like Brandon Hyde, and I'm sure it's frustrating where it's like it doesn't seem like anything I do is working, but that was just unforgivable sin, in my personal opinion. So basically, I'll take anybody at this point. I think at a certain point, the message just gets stale after a certain amount of time, unless you're like Terry Francona or a guy who's just next level. I just think at a certain point, a new voice in the room is just what the doctor ordered.
Go now to this question from the Bird is a Word, going back to him. Do you think Kobe Mayo finally starts to get in the groove? I'll start with Nick here.
I mean, we've highlighted all the positives that he's done, all the changes that he's made, all the deep analytical articles that have been written and highlighted everything. There's nothing left for him to learn or do or prove in AAA. It's up to him at this point to make that transition to the big leagues. I honestly don't know. Nobody knows. But he's done everything he can in the minor leagues, and at this point, I feel like it's maybe not entirely sink or swim, but it is entirely up to him at this point if he can start hitting. And like I said, he was, even at the very beginning of the year when the numbers were terrible, as we mentioned a couple of times, he was actually playing extremely well down in AAA, and nothing, the demotion at the end of spring training didn't phase him. The poor batted ball luck didn't phase him. He stuck through. So now let's see if this moved back up in a second shot. Let's see if the struggles here in this first couple of games don't phase him and he can settle in and find a groove. But that would also require him to get regular playing time, and I don't trust that he's going to get that. So TBD.
Exactly. To me, it's going to come down to, is he getting every day or at least close to every day at bats where he can try to get into a groove? Because, yeah, if that happens, I am pretty confident that he's going to start to put it together and be the player we know he can be. But it's just going to take, like, if he's just here until Westberg gets back sometime early next week, or maybe, who knows, sometime soon, then I don't even know what the point of bringing him up was, to be honest with you, because he needs consistent playing time and he needs some confidence. I think it's just going to take his first home run. That'll probably take the weight off his shoulders, and he'll just be able to let loose. And like we talked about earlier, like, he's not swinging at pitches out of the zone as much this year. He's making more contact in the zone. When he makes contact, it's incredibly good contact. He crosses every check mark. It's just got to start to happen in Major League Baseball games. And I thought he looked pretty good so far in the 2 games he's played in. He worked a nice walk. He was able to hang in there against a guy throwing upper 90s, touching 100. Unfortunately popped out, but I mean, he's not, I can already tell he's a little more comfortable at the plate this year. So hopefully that just continues. And yeah, I think he could break out soon.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually thought that he took a couple of nice trips to the plate in Sunday's finale against Kansas City. Do I think a breakout could happen? Yes, but as Nick said, I think a lot of that is going to be on him to figure it out at the major league level, and it just comes down to reps too. If he doesn't get the reps, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'll admit, I was preparing for this show, and I look ahead at the probables for the series against Minnesota. The Orioles are facing 3 righties in a row, so now I don't have much hope that we're going to see much of Mayo this week. I hope I'm wrong, and he gets at least 1 or 2 starts against the Twins. But with the way that Brandon Hyde tends to use players when they come up in these platoon situations, I don't know that we're going to see a whole lot of them. And hopefully, with whatever time he gets in the major leagues, he's able to get reps to show that he can get better and turn the page. Because, as I said on our weekly recap this week on Patreon, Coby Mayo's ceiling represents the missing piece of this lineup, which is an impact bat from the right side. The Orioles don't have that right now. They don't have someone with that kind of power. Mayo at his best is that, but he has to be able to develop to become that player, and that's going to require giving him a lot of reps. And while you're struggling, maybe one of the silver linings is you can get him in there more often.
I'd love to see the team have the balls to just demote or lower Mountcastle in a lineup, bench him more often. God, he has been so bad. Like, can we he has an option. Let him get it figured out in the minor leagues, please.
I've heard 2 different podcasts this week highlight Ryan Mountcastle as a trade target, and I swear to God, just give me a cheeseburger and I will take this deal already. But to hear like multiple other podcasts discuss, Ryan Mountcastle could be an option. I'm like, please, you guys have no idea what you're getting into, but please take him for the love of God.
His big RBI single in Sunday's game, I think it was a routine ground ball to second base like he always hits, but they were playing him up the middle, so it got through. So it's like, woohoo, good job.
And on that pleasant note, we'll now head into our final segment of the show, Last Call, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridgely Street. Checker Spot is near Oriole Park at Camden Yards, making it the perfect place for a pre- or post-game drink. And with the Orioles out of town this week, it's also a good place to go watch the games while they're on the road. So be sure to check them out. And when the Birds come back in town, you can find Checker Spot behind home plate at Camden Yards, where one of their signature beers, the Bird is a Word, is available this season. And for our last call segment in this episode, we're going to go with our usual routine of highlighting players who have finished outside the top 30 portion of our top 50 prospects list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or just something interesting we want to note in their stat line. And I'm going to start with Bob because he's got a pitcher that I know we wanted to make sure we highlighted before this episode ended.
Yeah, I'll start with my hitter just to get him out of the way, and then we can all talk about the pitcher a little bit. Hitter for me is going to be, I don't know if it's Luis Guevara, 19 years old, from Venezuela, was signed in January 2023. He's had some pretty consistently good DSL seasons in his first 2 seasons. In 2023 at a 135 WRC plus. He repeated the level last year, had a 118 WRC plus. Well, Edwin Amparo got, we have 2 Amparos. I was trying to remember which one it was. Edwin Amparo got a little bit banged up. They needed someone from the complex. And it was pretty telling to me that Guevara was the guy that got pulled up. They deemed him ready. Whatever he was doing down there must have caught their attention. And it's translated pretty well over his first 33 plate appearances. He's batting .320 with an .812 OPS, 146 WRC plus. Walk rate, 15.2%. Actually, the lowest strikeout rate of his career at 12.1%. Not hitting for any power to date, like a 62, 45, and now a 40 ISO. So that's not really part of his game at this point. But again, he's 19 until next February. But yeah, he steals bases. He stole 16 in 2023, 20 in 2024, and he's already got 2 so far this season in a week and a half of games. So just wanted to shout him out as a little international prospect on the come up. And then, yeah, the pitcher is Cohen Aiken. the 14th round draft pick out of last year's draft, signed for $25,000 out of Lindsey Wilson College, who, he's 23 years old, but he starts the season in low A, 3 games there, 14 innings pitched, 3.21 ERA with a 26% strikeout rate, gets promoted up to high A and has 1 start there, 1.80 ERA over 5 innings, and then immediately is promoted to double A, which at the time I didn't know if it was just a paper move, like he wasn't even going to pitch for double A, but they needed to shuffle things around. But no, he started and he went 4 1/3 innings and he pitched really well. Gave up 3 hits, a walk with 4 strikeouts, only gave up 1 run. So I don't know what you guys make of Cohen Aiken. Is he just in double A now, or is this was like, hey, we need a starter. We trust that he could get some guys out and then he can go continue his development in Aberdeen. I'm not sure, but liking what I'm seeing from this kid so far.
Before we hopped on and we talked about Aiken there for a second, I looked at Aberdeen's roster, and when you look at their roster, everyone's hurt, like at every level. So I don't really know what other option could have went to double A to help replace Alex Pham when he went on the IL. Maybe like sending Riley Cooper up. We know he can eat a couple of innings, but like there's no like starter who I feel like, yeah, you've earned this promotion. It's time to move you up. I mean, Trey Gibson, Nestor Herman, I think have a valid argument, but yeah, I have a tough time with that one too. I have thoughts about Aiken. I might save a couple of them for the top 50 update, but it was an interesting move, and I could see him going back down to high A if the Bay Sox can get some healthy arms back in the next week or two. But if he has a second outing like his first one, why go back? There's no reason to go back. Like I said, let's be aggressive with these guys. And even if you're like, oh, we got to go somebody, hey, can you do this? Maybe he's going to open up some eyes and take advantage of this opportunity.
It's funny. I've seen Angel Tejada's name pop up on the pitcher box score a few times for Aberdeen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if it's going to be a lasting promotion or not, but one, he is having a really good year. He earned that promotion to Aberdeen. I do think that was, performance and experience based. And the other thing is that I watched his outing against Hartford on Saturday. What impressed me was that the slider in the first inning, he was locating it, but it was getting hit around a little bit. The deeper he got into the outing, the more effective it became. Hitters were swinging and missing at it. When they were making contact, the contact was getting weaker. He does a good job of moving his fastball around. So there's not that one plus pitch that really jumps out at you, but he seems to have a decent arsenal that he locates well. So that's a good foundation.
I can go to mine now. I'm going to go down to the FCL since they just started. They've only played 2 games, but why not? I just want to keep throwing this name out there as often as we can right now until he proves me wrong. Andrew Tess, 12th round pick last year, Florida high school ranks. I'm just getting this feeling about Tess. He's a bigger kid. He doesn't look like a guy they just drafted out of high school when you see some of the limited video clips, but I think he's going to become a really interesting prospect in this system. They drafted him as a catcher. We'll see how much he plays behind the plate in FCL this year. We'll see what he does defensively, but he's picked up 3 singles and a walk in his first 2 FCL games. Just stash the name away. I think Andrew Tess is going to be a guy who I am becoming more and more gravitated to as I look down there. And then for my pitcher, I don't know if we highlighted him recently or not, but I'll do it again because he had a good week. Asel Correa, 22-year-old arm down in Delmarva. He came over from Cuba in 2023, and he was actually stuck. I went back and looked, and to make sure, I thought I remember hearing something about this after the Orioles signed him, but he was stuck in the Dominican for a couple of years after he got out of Cuba and wasn't able to sign with anyone. I'm not going to speculate as to why, but he couldn't sign for a while. The Orioles were able to get him, and he's had like a decent year in the DSL. Was okay last year. He's repeating Delmarva, and yeah, he's 22, but spoiler, I bumped him up into the top 50, and I think he cracked the very back end of our brand new top 50 list. 8 innings last week, 0 earned runs. He did walk 5 guys, but he struck out 9. And on the year, 24 innings, he has 27 strikeouts, 10 walks, so half of his walks came just last week, but a 2.55 ERA. Yeah, we'll see. I know when they signed him, I know the report was low 90s fastball, curveball, changeup, and he didn't get a very big signing bonus. But we'll see if he gets to Aberdeen in the next couple of weeks. Then obviously that's a good sign.
I'll start with my hitter, and this is a guy that was routinely on our top 50 list for a while before dropping off after an injury-plagued 2024. Braylon Tavera. Now, I will just throw this out there as the pronunciation. It is spelled like Braylon, and in fact, I had heard Braylon after he signed, and for the first couple of years he was in pro ball. More recently, though, on some broadcasts, I have heard it pronounced Braylon. So if anyone with the answer could clarify that for us, that would be great. But Tavera had a really good series at Fayetteville last week. In 5 games, he belted 3 home runs while walking 6 times and striking out 7. When you look at Tavera's stat line this year, what's clear is we're seeing a lot more power, and like he has in the past, he's drawing a decent walk rate. Still striking out way too much. It's north of 36% right now. But for a guy that was hurt for a lot of last year and not particularly good at the plate when he was healthy, this has been a really nice turnaround story, not to mention that he's still just 20 years old. So plenty of time for him to develop, and he's getting off to a solid start this year. And then I'm going to go down to the FCL for my pitcher, Jesus Palacios. In Saturday's opener, Palacios pitched 4 innings against the Pirates, giving up 1 unearned run on 1 hit with 9 strikeouts to 2 walks. And to give a little bit of background on him, he was signed by the Orioles out of Venezuela as part of the 2022 international free agent class and would pitch the next 2 summers at the Dominican Summer League before going to the FCL last year. He struggled last year, owing in no small part to a high ERA and a high walk rate. But one thing that we saw in the Dominican Summer League was that after a rough first season, he went back there the following year and improved significantly. If he's going to do that in 2024 in the FCL, or 2025, in the FCL, Saturday's start is a very good sign of things to come. And for a little bit more on him and on the FCL team, I would encourage you to go check out our Substack, because Nick wrote a pretty good piece about them that just came out this morning.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the FCL. Not that we can watch, but I honestly think at least half the FCL team is going to be in Delmarva before midway through the full season ball is up, and it's going to make Delmarva that much more fun to watch and better. And there's so many good prospects in the FCL this season.
And with that, that does it for our show this week. We'll be back later in the week with another round of questions from our mailbag. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolsOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community. You will get access to patron-exclusive channels in our Discord, as well as weekly bonus shows from Bob, Nick, and myself, and monthly updates to our top 50, the first of which is dropping this week. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Smedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Smedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we once again open the mailbag to take more questions from our listeners. We got some great ones earlier this week in our first mailbag segment, and I have to hand it to you, our listeners. Really came out strong for this one because we've got another really good round of questions in this episode, looking at some possible extensions for the Orioles, as well as a little bit of prospect talk, and again, discussing about Brandon Hyde's status and future as manager of the Orioles. We could not avoid that topic this week. But I want to start off with a what-if question that I'm honestly surprised has not come up before now on our show. And it comes from KTG TV. A two-parter assuming Bobby Witt Jr. also wouldn't sign an extension with the Orioles. If you could go back to the 2019 draft and all the Orioles picks after number 1 stayed the same, would you still draft Adley or would you draft Bobby Witt? Part 2 of this question is, if you could go back to the 2019 draft and some picks after number 1 changed. Maybe some are the same, but I would assume most are different. Would you draft Adley or would you draft Witt? Nick, I'm going to start with you here, and I'll just say that I feel like whatever we answer is going to piss off half of our listeners. So I'll just let you start
that. There was that one guy like very early on in our podcast existence that every single time Adley did anything good, any Adley tweet, he responded with Bobby Witt is better, or some variation of just that one liner. So this reminded me of that guy. I hope he's doing well. It's easy to get frustrated and say like the Orioles should have drafted Witt, especially after just watching the Royals beat the Orioles and watch Witt do Witt things and see him become who he is. Baseball is more beautiful and better because Bobby Witt is great. And I hope when it's all said and done, I can look back at least at his career and say we got to watch one of the greatest to ever do it. I'm still 100% Adley, though. I just think because of hindsight, it's very difficult to go back and put yourself in the 2019 shoes. It is nearly impossible. But going into that draft, like Adley was an elite player on an NCAA championship team. He was an elite player on the national stage for Team USA collegiate team. Like he was the best of the best at some of the top levels, amateur levels. And I also feel like he's a catcher. Like, you're entering this super long rebuild that you're tearing down to the studs. He's a catcher. Maybe you keep him in the minors a little bit longer. He can be a leader in all these minor league clubhouses because he's done it on the biggest stage possible for an amateur player up to that point. He can be a leader in these clubhouses as he moves up the ranks, and he makes the pitchers that he works with better as he climbs up the ranks. And, maybe ideally you start working with these guys and they come up through the system together. And now you've got Adley with a group of arms that know each other like the back of their hands. And it all makes this transition to the big leagues easier. Of course, injuries happen, things happen, maybe derailed some of that, but I don't know. He was as polished as they come as a college player, and you knew you were preparing for this long rebuild. And I still think Adley was the correct pick, regardless of the situation.
Yeah, that's a tough question because I think people underrate Adley still. I mean, yeah, he had a bad second half of 2024 and a slow start to 2025, but honestly, he's got a lot more red in his Savant page than he did last year. His BABIP is like 233, so he's not had the luck. His approach is back to what it was 2022, 2023, where he's walking more and still striking out not much. Like, I think it's just a matter of I think he's the guy that we want him to be. It's just a matter of the numbers indicating that. Would it be awesome to have a left side of the infield with Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt together? Yeah, it would. But then I don't know. Then you wouldn't have Jordan Westberg. Maybe Kirby Mayer wouldn't be a potentially a big as part of your future. I don't know. If you start doing ifs and at the time, 2019, there's no world where I'm taking Bobby Witt over Adley Rutschman. So it's only in hindsight that you could potentially say you'll take Witt over Adley. I don't know. He's going to put up the better numbers. He's going to get you more highlight reels, but I still think Adley has a lot of value to this team as a well above average catcher, leader in the clubhouse. Like, I don't know. And if you extend him, he's a guy that's probably going to get a statue or at least a big part of Orioles history down the line. So gun to my head, I'll keep things the same.
Yeah, I would keep the things the same for two reasons. One of them is that I agree with both of you. If you go back to 2019, that was the correct pick at that time. And I actually remember the fall before when we were, Bob and I were at Baltimore Sports and Life. I actually wrote a piece over there. And at that point, I said that I preferred Witt over Rutschman. And then as we got into the spring that year, I ended up flipping to Rutschman because I just felt like for a franchise that was in the very early stages of the rebuild, he was the more surefire building block than Witt was. And I still believe that to be true. The other reason that I wouldn't do things over is that it still all sort of worked out in the end. You got Gunnar Henderson in the same draft. He's going to be neck and neck with Bobby Witt Jr. for most of his career, I suspect. You still ended up with Jordan Westberg. Kobe Mayo, if things pan out with him, you still ended up with him. The point is, you covered the left side of the infield. You made up for the fact that you didn't have Bobby Witt. So, is it possible that 5 years from now you're going to look back and say, hands down, the Orioles should have taken Witt? Yes, but I also think that Adley is going to get back on track here eventually, and this conversation probably won't be happening much, if at all.
It's always going to happen. Like I said, I'm glad they're both painted out to be great MLB players. Another question from Bobby says, what would an extension for Tomoyuki Sugano and Ryan O'Hearn look like? Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, Sugano would be an interesting little extension. He's looked good, and especially his last few times out, getting more strikeouts, the splitter looks really good. Maybe getting more comfortable on the 5-day schedule and pitching in the majors. And we'll see how he does in the heat. Hopefully, he doesn't cramp up too much. But I would be down for like a similar, maybe not the same deal that I'd be happy to extend to Zach Eflin at this point, but maybe like a tack on 2 years. $30 million to his deal. I think I'd be comfortable with that at this point. And for Ryan O'Hearn, I don't know. Like, he's been awesome. Like, he's fine. I feel like this year he's putting the best of 2023 and 2024 combined, and he's walking more, striking out less, but hitting the ball hard and getting extra base hits. And he should be the everyday first baseman, or at least splitting first base and DH with Kobe Mayo, and Ryan Mountcastle should go away. But I don't know if I would extend him. Maybe a 1 year, like one more year, 10 million. But maybe he deserves to hit the open market. Maybe I would trade him if we need a reboot. That's a guy you could trade with some value, and then maybe re-sign him for a 1 or 2 year deal in the offseason if you're wants and needs align going into 2026. But yeah, Sugano I'd be more open to for sure.
Yeah, Sugano, I think a 2 year deal right around that price tag that you mentioned, Bob, would make sense. Given his age, I wouldn't be as comfortable committing as much to him in terms of years or dollars as I would Zach Eflin. But I would consider Sugano if he continues to pitch this well. And then for O'Hearn, where I'm a little bit torn is that we have seen O'Hearn kind of have peaks and valleys in his performances over the last 2 years. And fortunately, the good parts have outweighed the bad, but he'll go through his cold stretches. With that said, I like what he's doing this year. And if the Orioles made the qualifying offer to him and he accepted it at this rate, I'd be very happy with that outcome. So 1 year deal where you have to overpay a little bit to keep him around, I think would be ideal. If you've got to do a 2 year deal, I would consider that, but I wouldn't go a whole lot more because keep in mind, he's going to be 32 in July. So this is not a young player that broke out. This is someone who realistically, is not a long-term guy that you're going to commit 5-7 years to. Nowhere near that.
Yeah, I almost wonder if Sugano, I agree. I think he could be a good guy to plug into the back end of your rotation for the next couple of years. It's not like he's been throwing, 95 plus miles per hour in Japan all these years. He's more, obviously, the more command guy, so his arm should hold up a little bit longer. I'm fine with that. With O'Hearn, I would almost prefer if you try to maybe package him with some low level like DSL prospects, some high ceiling younger teenage prospects, and see what kind of deal you could get. Because I feel like he would be in demand come the trade deadline. And you've got Dylan Beavers, as we're talking about. If Dylan Beavers is going to continue on this trend, that's a left-handed bat who can play some outfield. I don't know if Beavers has played any first base down in the minor leagues up to this point, but you've got Samuel Basayo coming up. He plays a fantastic first base, and of course can DH for you when he's not behind the plate. So I'm a lot more comfortable with O'Hearn leaving. I'm not going to hate if he returns, but yeah, Sugano I think makes the most sense of the two.
No first base for Dylan Beavers in 2025. He did play 13 games there last year in AA, but none so far this year. Let's see. Next question is going to come from EJ, who asks, who is the best Orioles prospect you would part with in a realistic trade for a starting pitcher? Or, to put it another way, are there any Orioles prospects that would be off the table for you when looking to address the starting pitcher's woes mid-season? Zach?
So I go back to a hypothetical trade that a listener asked us about over the offseason, and it was, would you give up Kobe Mayo if it meant you could get Logan Webb from the Giants? And I said yes, that I would, because I think Webb has maybe 3 years of team control, including this year, or 3 beyond this year. I'm not sure which, but regardless, multiple years of control for a really good pitcher. With the way the Giants are playing, though, that is no longer a realistic possibility. So it would probably be lower than Mayo now. I would say the top prospect that realistically I would be the most comfortable giving up with the pitchers that I expect to be available. It's going to be Enrique Bradfield Jr. or Vance Honeycutt. One of those two, but ideally not both. And then as far as who is untouchable, Samuel Basallo is untouchable. I think that that's kind of established by this point. And I think Mayo, if he performs well during this call-up, even if it is a short-term move, moves into that category, because now you start to think, are you basically subtracting from the Major League roster by trading Mayo to get a starting pitcher? Yeah, you get a starter, but you're making another area of your team weaker in the process. You don't want to do that. It's kind of the argument against trading Jordan Westburg would now apply to Mayo. So maybe Mayo's not all the way there yet in terms of being untouchable, but he's getting close.
I think for me, that point does make a lot of sense there about Mayo. For me, I just think Basallo would probably be the only untouchable, just because, as we mentioned, I don't want to call him franchise altering. That's too much. But as we've talked about a lot, like, he could be the face of the Baltimore Orioles across Latin America. Kids in the DR are going to grow up idolizing Basallo. They're going to be an Oriole just like Basallo. The Orioles as an organization are going to garner a lot more respect in that market as they try to build that pipeline, especially if the Orioles decide to lock him down sometime soon. But I think this organization needs Basallo to become a star in Baltimore for many reasons that aren't just wins and losses at the major league level. So I would say, honestly, just Basallo. If you move Mayo, like, I need something big. I do need that Logan Webb type arm. And like you said, the Giants, that's the difficult thing with the trade questions going on right now. It's like a lot of teams and a lot of arms, like, they're clearly coming off the market. Like, even like a Dylan Cease. Do the Padres decide to move on from Cease? I think he's had some issues here lately, but like, the Padres are in this. Are they still going to move one of their starters for a bat? I doubt it. Like, I think the options are going to be pretty limited. So for this midseason trade, I think that's the caveat there, where I would say, yeah, Mayo is probably untouchable as well, unless you're guaranteeing me a bona fide stud with multiple years of control, which I don't see how many of those arms are going to be available in the next 2 months.
Yeah, I think now at this point, I'm less willing to trade guys, because I think even Enrique Bradfield Jr., like, that is a personality I want in this clubhouse. That is like a potential face of the franchise personality type, and skills on the field as well. But I think before the season, you could have twisted my arm and I would have traded maybe Kobe Mayo in a Pablo Lopez type of deal. Now I'm not. I'm just not doing that. Basallo was always off limits. I think he's a stud and he should be here for his entire career, or at least sign him to the 15-year deal today. Dylan Beavers, again, like, I think I like Dylan Beavers more than Heston Kjerstad at this point, and never thought I'd say that, but here we are. I think, like I said on the previous Mailbag episode earlier this week, Vance Honeycutt, yeah, I mean, I like what they've been able to do with him so far, but we've talked about before, he's a little bit more of a project, as Dylan Beavers was at some point too. I think I'm not trading McDermott or Brandon Young at this point, because we need those arms. That's for sure. So Honeycutt, Judd Fabian, I don't even want to trade him. Like, I'm just like, if we're going to be rebooting or not as sure about what we have, even if we do get back into it, I'm just less willing to trade these guys. I'm going to go deeper into the system. Creed Willems, Trey Sprite, what can we get for those guys that need to be added to the 40-man in this offseason that still have value, rather than the guys that could be part of the extension of the core?
We'll go now to this question from Seth. If the season continues to go sideways, who might be the most surprising prospect to debut before 2026? Start with Nick.
Surprising prospect. Realistically, I just have a hard time seeing a shocking name. Like, unless there's a lot of trading off of guys and multiple spots open up. I don't know. Like, if Beers and Fabian stay, they need to be protected from the Rule 5 draft, so they may get shots, but that's not really surprising considering their status. Basayo, of course. Like, the easy answer, I guess, would be Braxton Bragg if he keeps dominating like this. But I would bet massive amounts of money, even if the season goes sideways, that they let him reach his innings cap in AAA and then shut him down before they would add him to the Major League roster this year. It's a boring answer. It's not fun at all, but I'm looking at guys like a Dylan Hyde or a Carlos Tavera. They need a reliever late in the year. Thank you for your years of service in the minor leagues and all of your hard work. Here's an MLB outing or two before we ultimately DFA you. Like, I don't know if I see any shocker coming up to the big leagues, especially if it's done this year.
Yeah, this isn't really the front office that's going to bring Jeff Fiorentino straight up from High Frederick. I don't think we're going to see that. Like, outside shot of Levi Wells, maybe Cameron Weston could definitely see that if he turns it around and they need an arm. But yeah, I was thinking like Keegan Gillies, who's for some reason still at Double HS peak, even though he is absolutely dominating, and there's no excuse that he's not in AAA. Maybe he comes up and he proves to be an impact reliever at the Major League level towards the end of the season, something like that.
Gillies is a good answer. Cameron Weston was going to be my guy, and the only reason that I think that's really surprising is that he is off to a little bit of a slow start. But as I said in our last show, there's a couple of pitchers that I think their numbers right now are better than what the back of the baseball card stats suggest. And I would put Weston in that group because he's had a few rough outings in a row, but after giving up home runs, I think in 2 or 3 straight starts, he's now gone 3 consecutive outings without giving up a home run. He's got a ground ball rate over 50%. The strikeout rate is good. So it feels like as the walks start to come down for him, he'll be fine. If you want to go with a real dark horse, I wouldn't rule out someone like Peter Van Loon, who's been around a while, can give you some balk innings out of the bullpen. Yeah, he's down in Double-A. He had a cup of coffee in Norfolk at the end of April, but he's down in Double-A now. But I'd have to think if Norfolk needs an arm at some point in the next month or two out of the bullpen, Van Loon's a guy that you would promote. And again, if there is some sort of emergency type situation like what Nick talked about with Dylan Hyde or Carlos Tavera, I think Van Loon would apply there too.
You're going to get Jordan Adams. You're going to like it.
Yeah. I was going to say, how about Nolberth Romero? Just, you need someone to fill in. He's your guy. He has been that guy.
Oh boy. Then we've really spiraled. Vivek's question here. Can we discuss cases of other teams that have gotten off to historically bad starts but still made the playoffs? Astros and Nationals, for example. Also discuss teams that even within their winning window failed to make the playoffs. It's a long list here of examples. The Padres recently, 2023 Mets, 2023 Yankees, 2021 and 2024 Blue Jays. Thoughts about these teams?
Yeah, I think it's a good perspective to have, because when you're in this losing funk where it seems like nothing can go right, like even if this year is a wash, it doesn't mean the window's shut. It doesn't mean the rebuild was a failure and Elias should be fired. Like, sometimes these things happen and there's not much you can do about it, especially with all the injuries. And yeah, there is still a chance for the team to turn it around. Like, there is a lot of talent. The core is still really good for this team. Like, if Gunnar is, I think over the past, all right, I did do the math here. Gunnar missed spring training pretty much completely. And since April 26th, which was about 4 weeks after starting his rehab with AAA Norfolk, basically a spring training around 4 weeks. Since April 26th, he's batting .371 with a .948 OPS, only striking out 16.2% of the time. So he's back in the mix of things. Adley's been unlucky. We've said it. Holiday is just breaking out. We've talked about if Westberg comes back healthy, Mayo can break out. Like, there's definitely a chance that they could turn things around. But I kind of had this perspective Sunday. I was really probably the most upset I've been at the major league team after the Charlie Morton decision by Brandon Hyde. And it really pissed me off when I thought I couldn't be hurt anymore by this team this year. But then I turned on the Delmarva game afterwards. For some reason, I was still in the mood for some more low A baseball. And it actually gave me a decent perspective where I was like, all right, this is why we do this. Like, we're focused on the minor leagues for a reason, because this sport is a journey. You know, I like seeing these kids develop. So it kind of brought me back, you know, that optimism. That's what baseball is. There's like constantly optimism that there is potential hope in the future coming on the way. And yeah, need that right now more than ever.
Yeah, to go with Vivek's question, I'll focus on the second part because we did talk a little bit about the Astros and the Nats last week. I think if you want to look at parallels from the examples of teams that failed to make the playoffs during their winning window, the 2023 Yankees are one that jumps out because they were largely hurt by Aaron Judge, missing a lot of time with injuries. And as we've seen with the Yankees, since Aaron Judge arrived in the major leagues, as Aaron Judge goes, so go the Yankees. And when he's healthy and playing every day, they're a threat to win the World Series. He's producing an MVP level. When he's not in the lineup, that lineup looks very beatable. The mediocre pitching staff gets exposed, and all of a sudden they're really not the big bad Yankees anymore. If you wanted to take a different perspective, though, you could focus on the 2021 Padres and say there was a team that seemingly had all the pieces in place, and then just for whatever reason, the bottom fell out and they played horrible baseball in the second half. That ended up costing Jace Tingler his job as a manager. And if you're wondering right now, did I remember the name Jace Tingler off the top of my head? No. I pulled up Baseball Reference while Bob was talking because I couldn't remember his name. So Jace Tingler loses his job. Bob Melvin, I think, came in after that. And the Padres turned it around briefly before Bob Melvin didn't work again, and now we're just on this AJ Preller thing where just keep adding players until it somehow works. The Orioles don't operate that way, but there is an interesting parallel there with the Padres in that, again, the pieces were in place. And if you say the Orioles slide really began the second half of last year, you could see some similarities there.
I'm just reminiscing about Jace Tingler right now and how much supposedly that clubhouse despised that man. It's just so hard for me to be optimistic. I want to talk about prospects. I want to talk about the draft. I want to talk about anything else. My rebuttal to some of those examples would be specifically like the Astros and Nationals, though. Like those teams, both those teams had something that the Orioles do not have, and that is pitching. And I know the Orioles' problem is way more than pitching, but that Astros team had Framber Valdez top 10 Cy Young season. Hunter Brown emerged as a dude. They got the one year that Ronel Blanco was ever going to have in Major League Baseball. I think he threw a no-hitter that year. I watched that game. I think it was 2024. Spencer Arrighetti was okay. He struck out a ton of dudes. Like, he's perfectly fine back in the rotation. And they unlocked something in Yusei Kikuchi after that trade, and he was fantastic down the stretch. And that Nationals team had three guys, Strasburg, Patrick Corbin, and Max Scherzer, all finished top 11 in Cy Young voting. And I think I go back to Bob's last example about the Kyle Gibson thing. This team said Kyle Gibson's going to be the adult in the room now. He's pissing the bed 2 starts now. And then this team sent out Charlie Morton in the 8th inning. And it's not a must-win game, but Bob just went over this. But I agree at that point right there it's not a must-win, but you've got a real chance to take this series against the Royals make it back-to-back series wins finally, get some real momentum. Do you think that's the thing or not? Like, you send out Charlie Morton in the 8th inning. Like, no, that's my only thing here. It's that this team does not have that pitching that can match any of those teams. Again, like I mentioned before, we talked about this. The AL isn't as strong overall as it's been in the past. So maybe a weaker AL as a whole, expanded playoffs, you can sneak in. And as everyone is well aware of, the playoffs are a complete crapshoot. Even this Orioles team playing like this, getting into the playoffs, could suddenly turn around and make some noise for a couple of weeks and win this thing. But it's just getting harder and harder for me to have the positive outlook, even with all of these examples sitting here in front of us.
No doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we got a little bit of like dueling pianists here from The Bird is the Word and Bobby Jones. They both have similar questions. Who is the next minor league pitcher to get a shot / next pitcher to make their major league debut? I'll throw it back to Nick.
Debut, I'll take the low-hanging fruit here and say Cade Stroud, just because he's on the 40-man already. We saw him get called up, didn't make that appearance. So if something happens, they need a righty. I imagine it would be him. Another pitcher to get a shot. I mentioned him before. I don't remember what episode we talked about this, but I mentioned the name before, and he's healthy now. But I'm going to say Levi Stout gets a shot. If you're looking at spring training numbers from this year, so he was sitting 95, elite IVB numbers, like close to 20 inches, I believe. Mid-80 slider, 10 plus miles of separation between the fastball and changeup, more than 6.5 feet of extension. Stuff plus numbers were fastball 103, slider 116, changeup 103. And if you compare, that's just 3 innings, but if you compare those to his AAA from last year, about 10 points up across the board there in like stuff plus numbers, and about 2 miles per hour in velo. So I don't know. He started the minor league season on the IL, but returned this past weekend. He made a rehab outing in Aberdeen, as like 18 other pitchers did as well, it seemed like. Scoreless inning with a strikeout. So I don't know, he's not on the 40-man. Andrew Kittredge just coming back because he also just had a rehab appearance in Aberdeen. Colin Selby and Cade Stroud are righties on the 40-man already, so I imagine Stout might be down the pecking order a little bit, but I think he's going to get a shot at some point.
Yeah, I think Stout is a potential dude for sure. Looking for the guy who I'm very high on right now, Yaramil Geraldo, 29 years old in AAA. Now, I think he is legit going to be the next big find for the Orioles out of the bullpen. His stuff is fantastic. Can't wait to see him get a shot, but it also could be Chase McDermott. He's back. He's in AAA. He threw, 4 scoreless innings the last time out? Maybe 3. I can't remember. But if he's going to be healthy and full go, there's between him and Brandon Young. I mean, if you need a starter, who else are you going to call? Probably not Trevor Rogers just yet, who's still struggling a bit down there in AAA. Also think Nick just mentioned him, Carlos Tavera. He looks pretty solid out of the AAA bullpen, but Cade Stroud's also an easy answer. So plenty of options to choose from. And I think we're here for any and all major league debuts. That's for sure.
Yeah, Stroud is the easy option and probably correct one. If I had to pick out of that mix of starters who could make their debut or who could join the major league team next, not make their debut, I would go with McDermott. And the one thing that jumps out at me with McDermott is that he would give this pitching staff what it has lacked all season, which, any sort of quality would be helpful, but he can actually miss bats. And that was something that kind of stood out even going into the season about the Orioles 1 through 5 when we knew Grayson Rodriguez wasn't going to be healthy on opening days. You really don't have a strikeout pitcher in here. Zach Eflin, his best, is going to get a lot of ground balls and not walk anybody. He's a very good pitcher, but he doesn't strike people out at a high rate. McDermott can do that. He's shown that time and time again in the minor leagues. So if you want to shake things up a little bit and you want to get the guy that can actually put hitters away and pile up the strikeouts and not have to rely on the defense as much, McDermott is your answer. I'll go now to this question from John Botwright, and it's another Brandon Hyde question. Who is the best person to replace Hyde as manager, and why would he have better results than Hyde? And Bob, since you mentioned the name in our last show, I'm going to go back to you for this one.
I just think Buck Britton is right there. I think he's been groomed for this. I think the players love him. The front office love him. I've said this before. Like, he's not a guy that's like, oh, he's just what did the person to make stuff up on Twitter and Blue Sky say? Like, he's not just the older brother of the players and they're not going to listen to him. No, this is a guy who's not afraid to get on these guys and tell them when they're doing stuff wrong. They respect him. They love him. The front office loves him. I think it would be him, but I guess I don't think you're going to pull in anyone from the outside in the middle of a season. So, and I certainly don't think you're going to give it to Chiernos, who, I mean, I think it's cool that he's on the staff. Like, I think that's cool. Give him a shot as the bench coach, but he cannot be the guy that's just going to hop into the managerial role. So I just think it's Buck Britton, plain and simple. So
I tend to agree. I honestly, like, the manager talk. I don't know. We don't know that the grass is going to be greener on the other side, right? I'm gonna pull out that cliche. We don't know if firing Hyde is going to spark something. It could be the nail in the coffin to that clubhouse. We don't know. According to Jacob Calvin-Meyer, these guys love him. I don't know, and I'm sure they do. Like, I love Brandon Hyde. Honestly, like, he was there during dark times, but yeah, he's kind of driving everybody crazy right now with a lot of these decisions, and I think a lot of people would be satisfied if he was gone. As far as a replacement, though, like, yeah, I just go back to, I think I brought this up off air, I think, after a show. I just go back again to, because we're not in the clubhouse. We don't know these guys personally, these managers personally, at least. Like, I go back to that Nico Goodrum interview, and career journeyman, right? Small time MLB career there with the Tigers, but like, he's bounced around the league, but he's been in this game for a long time. He had more than a decade in professional baseball. And when he came on the show, again, one of the best interviews we've ever done, he had the praise he had for Buck Britton was enormous. And it was just really cool to hear the way he talked about Buck Britton and how he handled himself in his relationship with the players in that Norfolk clubhouse, and how, like, yeah, he's not buddy, but like, there was a lot of respect for Buck Britton in that clubhouse, and he wasn't going to sugarcoat it for these guys to help prepare them for the next level. And I just feel like a guy like Nico Goodrum, who's in his mid-30s, been around the block multiple times. Buck Britton has never been in the big leagues, didn't make it as a player, hasn't made it as a manager yet. Like, Nico Goodrum can just be like, okay, sure, like, tell me when to hit. All right, I don't need to listen to anything you say. I'm out of here at the end of the year. But just the praise that he had for him, I think, spoke volumes to me. So I think, right, if you're going to make a move mid-season, it's, yeah, the easy choices right there.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I don't really think that there is another choice. You don't have a Terry Francona or a Bruce Bochy sitting out there, whereas that guy's going to the Hall of Fame one day, and we can bring him in now to turn this around. Let's do it. Joe Madden is not that guy. Joe Girardi is not that guy. It's going to be Buck Britton if there is a move in season. One thing that we hear about Britton, and Nico Goodrum talked about this in that interview, one thing we hear consistent about Britton is the lines of communication are always open and they are really strong. And if there has ever been a time where you need that, it is right now. And I'm not saying that Brandon Hyde isn't giving it to them, because I don't know, without being in the clubhouse, what that dynamic is like. But if there's ever been a time where you really need a strong communicator, it's right now.
Agreed. I think this question came from Billy, and he wants to know, are any of us switching to Masson Plus?
No, but I'm not ruling it out eventually. Let's let them continue to iron out the kinks and get it where you're not 3 innings behind on the stream. And yeah, maybe eventually, but I'll wait until people say it's worth getting before I consider it.
Ideally, yes, because DirecTV Stream is kind of expensive. So it'd be nice to have a lower cost alternative, but I agree with Bob. I'm not going to rush in. And I have to give Billy B some credit here. sometimes when he asks a mailbag question, it's like, who's going to be the opening day starter in 2085? Like, I don't have an answer for that, but I do have an answer for this. So good job, Billy B.
Yeah, I'm not giving money to Masson. Shout out to my parents for their DirecTV stream password. I'll just keep using that.
I also share a DirecTV stream password with somebody. So yeah,
this is
That
not
makes three of us.
and it's not an ad at all because DirecTV stream is god awful.
It's not great and it's expensive. Yeah,
I don't want their sponsorship, but it's free 99, so I'm not complaining.
free 99, nice. Yeah, Brady Jones, not related to Bobby as far as I'm concerned, or as I know, even though my name's Bobby, kind of, and my son's name's Brady. Weird. Go to ballpark food or snack item. He always buys peanuts every game. What do you say, Zach? You go to a lot of games.
Sometimes when I go to a game, I'm just in the mood for a really good soft pretzel. And I know at one point the Orioles had those soft pretzels that were shaped like O's. I don't know if they still have them. I haven't seen them in a while. But those were pretty good. So that's probably my go-to snack.
I honestly rarely ever eat at a ballpark, and I live so far away from like all professional baseball that I so rarely get to go to games. It's a fun adventure, it's a fun trip, and so I like enjoying that new city or even Baltimore. Like I might get to Baltimore once a year, and so there's so many. I love good food, I love good beer, and so my wife and I are like, let's find a restaurant we haven't been to. Or if we're in a new city, let's find a cool, fun brewery downtown and have dinner before the game. So I usually eat before the game, and then I'm just drinking at the games. I will pay your overpriced for local craft beer at a game. Not drinking your Miller Lights or anything like that. I will happily pay all of my food fund and use that for beer at games.
I do like a good soft pretzel with some mustard on it, but I think I typically will get like the chicken tenders and fries, and then I'll get Cracker Jack as my stereotypical snack afterwards after eating the meal. But if you are looking for a nice bar downtown to go to before or after a game, Zach?
That's exactly right. We are now into the final segment, brought to you by Checker Spot Brewing, located at 1421 Ridley Street, not far from Oriole Park, Canham Yards. It makes a perfect place for a pre or post game drink. And with the Orioles out of town all week this week, it'd be a good time to go in there and just watch a game. Not to mention, I just talked about pretzels a minute ago. Very good pretzel bites there from the kitchen out of Checker Spot. So get some food while you're there too. And we'll go in now to this final question, which comes from Bobby Jones. Who makes their debut first, Dylan Beavers or Judd Fabian? I will start with Nick.
Can confirm the pretzel bites are great at Checker Spots, but I think it's got to be Dylan Beavers, and mainly just because like, Cedric Mullins is still on this roster right now. Ramon Laureano is here. Dylan Carlson is here. Like, there's really no need for like a center fielder like Fabian is. Fabian is also a right-handed hitter, and we just talked about Kobe Mayo. You're not going to get the at-bats. Dylan Beavers, there's more of a path being that lefty. And Beavers is just knocking the cover off the ball. I'm sure, Bob, you've got the numbers handy, and can talk about his recent stretch there. I don't have them right here in front of me. They're unbelievable. And so I think it should be rewarded. And honestly, like, give the man a shot at some point this year. I hope he does. I hope it's here in Baltimore, because the man, I don't know if I'm going to go as far as Vivek does and say he's Kyle Tucker light, but I have certainly been hopeful that Dylan Beavers can turn this thing around and finally have it click for him. And I truly hope we are actually seeing that right now and at the AAA level.
Yeah, I thought for sure Judd Fabian would be the answer to this until pretty recently. Yeah, Dylan Beavers, thank God the Orioles didn't throw him in every trade offer they made over the last year and a half, like a lot of people, including myself, have been. Because, man alive, yes. Like I said earlier, I can't remember if it was the first mailbag episode or this one, but I would honestly send Heston Kjerstad down to AAA for a little bit and give Dylan Beavers a shot, because he started off the season in the first week and a half, first two series, striking out 47.2% of the time, one extra base hit, hitting 161, 444 OPS, first 36 plate appearances. Since then, since April 8th, he is now hitting 356 with a 996 OPS, which is a 174 WRC plus. That is over 92 plate appearances, a 16.3% walk rate, went from 47.2% strikeout rate to a 13% strikeout rate since April 8th, and a 6.1% strikeout rate over his last 49 plate appearances. What? 178 ISO in that time. So whatever adjustment he made, it's working, and it's working really well.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset as Bob. If you had asked me this question before the season, or even as the season was starting, I would have said Jud Fabian, because both are, offensive prospects with very real questions about their bat. So when you're looking at that situation, you go with a guy that can play center field, which is Fabian. But Beavers, I think, has moved ahead of Fabian a little bit because of how he's performed at the plate. And like Nick said, the Orioles have enough options in center field right now. They don't have to consider center field defense when they bring somebody up. Cedric Mullins is in the middle of a very good season. Ramon Laureano has been used way more than I think the Orioles plan to use him, but he's a serviceable option in center field. And you do have Dylan Carlson around. So I think Beavers would be first up. And with that, that does it for this week. So we might have a bonus show for you later on this week. Keep an eye out on our social media channels, of which there are many, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today. You can join at the $3, $5, or $10 levels and have access to bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, as well as monthly updates to our top 50 prospects list, the first of which for this season dropped this week. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.